Wound Care 1, Oxygen Delivery Part 3. Oxygen carried in red blood cells and oxygen carried in the solution of blood, the plasma. In Parts 1 and 2 of oxygen delivery, we looked at general concepts of aerobic and anaerobic metabolism, the needs of organ systems like the brain, heart, and skin requiring oxygen to function, the anatomy of the respiratory system, and some of the gas laws. These laws were Dalton's and Henry's laws. Now let's look at what is happening in the lungs at the level of the alveoli. Remember, the alveoli are the terminal ends of the air transport system. It is a dry environment but contains water vapor, and it is separated from the wet environment inside the capillaries by a very thin membrane called the alveolar capillary membrane. The process of exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide is a dynamic process taking place in a humid environment. Each of the gases within the alveoli exerts a partial pressure. This is Dalton's law. The atmospheric pressure is approximately 760 millimeters of mercury pressure. The water vapor pressure inside the alveoli is known to be about 47 millimeters of mercury pressure. So 760 millimeters of mercury atmospheric pressure minus 47 millimeters of mercury pressure for the water vapor pressure equals 713 millimeters of pressure for the remaining gases in the alveoli. The remaining significant gases are primarily nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide, which contribute the remaining pressures of 713 millimeters of mercury pressure. You may be asking why carbon dioxide is a significant gas in the alveoli when it is a trace amount in the atmosphere. Yes, there are trace amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but the carbon dioxide in the alveoli are coming from the capillaries, not the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide in the alveoli is the waste product of metabolism being taken back to the alveoli in the blood. The concentration of the CO2 within the alveoli is greater than in the atmosphere. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli is approximately 40 millimeters of mercury pressure. How this is known will be discussed in another lesson, but for now, just accept it as a known value. 713 millimeters of mercury minus 40 millimeters of mercury pressure, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, leaves 673 millimeters of mercury pressure. The remaining gases in the alveoli contribute a total of 673 millimeters of mercury pressure. The trace elements in the air like argon, helium, hydrogen, methane, and ozone can and should be ignored for calculation purposes. These are ignored because these numbers are very small. The significant gases present which affect pressure in the alveoli are nitrogen and oxygen. Nitrogen will contribute approximately 556 millimeters of mercury pressure. That's 673 millimeters of mercury times 78% will equal 524 millimeters of mercury, and oxygen will contribute approximately 140 millimeters of mercury pressure. That's 673 millimeters of mercury times 21% equals 141 millimeters of mercury pressure. These numbers for partial pressures of gases are close approximations. They are not exact because of the dynamic nature of gases under different conditions like rest and exercise, but the numbers are very close. The next part of this lesson involves what seems a little more complex. Just remember that equations are our friends because they explain relationships between conditions affecting something that can be measured. That is a lot, but stay with this and it will become clearer. As background information, an adult individual at rest absorbs approximately 250 milliliters of oxygen per minute, and the same person eliminates approximately 200 milliliters of carbon dioxide per minute. The human male body contains about 10 pints of blood. This is about 4.7 liters of blood, which converts to 4,700 milliliters of blood. Each 100 milliliters of blood holds approximately 0.3 milliliters of oxygen dissolved in the solution of blood, called plasma. So the amount of oxygen dissolved in solution in an average male is 0.3 milliliters of oxygen per 100 milliliters of blood times 4,700 milliliters of blood in the average male equals 14.1 milliliters of oxygen. This is not enough oxygen to support life if one requires 250 milliliters of oxygen per minute at rest. The remainder of the oxygen required is carried by the hemoglobin molecule in the red blood cell. Each gram of hemoglobin can bind with 1.34 milliliters of oxygen. So if a patient's hemoglobin level is measured in the laboratory is 15 grams per 100 milliliters, then 20.1 milliliters of oxygen is carried in the 100 milliliters of blood. The equation is 1.34 milliliters of oxygen per gram times 15 grams equals 20.1 milliliters of oxygen. This is nearly 67 times the amount of oxygen dissolved in the solution of blood. Equation would be 20.1 milliliters of oxygen in hemoglobin divided by 0.3 milliliters of oxygen that is dissolved in solution equals approximately 67. Another way to see this is each 100 milliliters of blood carries 20.1 milliliters of oxygen, and there are 4,700 milliliters of blood in an adult male. Then the adult male carries 944.7 milliliters of oxygen. The equation is 20.1 milliliters of oxygen per 100 milliliters of blood times 40,700 milliliters of blood in an adult male equals 944.7 milliliters of oxygen. This easily meets the requirements of 250 milliliters of oxygen per minute at rest. It is very efficient to carry oxygen in red blood cells compared to carrying oxygen dissolved in solution under normal conditions. Now we are going to step up the complexity of oxygen delivery, but stay with me and hopefully it will be less complex because equations are our friends. Two of the most important equations in human physiology are CaO2 equals 1.3 times hemoglobin times SaO2 plus 0.003 times the PaO2 divided by 100 milliliters, and oxygen delivery equals Q times 1.3 times the hemoglobin times the SaO2 plus 0.003 times the PaO2. The first equation is the oxygen content equation. CaO2 is the content of oxygen in arterial blood. Hb is the serum concentration of hemoglobin. This value can be obtained when one orders a lab test. The SaO2 is the percent saturation of oxygen in the hemoglobin molecule. This is nearly 100%, but it has many things that affect it, like how acidic is the blood. And the PaO2 is the amount of arterial oxygen in the total oxygen of the blood. In this equation, the first part accounts for most of the oxygen in the blood, and the last part of the equation contributes only a small amount of oxygen in the blood under normal conditions. The amount of oxygen dissolved in the blood is much less than the oxygen carried in the red blood cells. As a side note, the amount of oxygen dissolved in blood becomes important when one considers hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBO. Using HBO can increase the amount of oxygen delivered to tissues by dissolving oxygen in the plasma of the blood. More on that later. The second equation is getting to the heart of these lessons on oxygen delivery. It is the oxygen delivery equation. Well, the variable Q is cardiac output. It is how much blood the heart can pump out to other parts of the body. If the heart cannot pump to other parts of the body, then oxygen delivery will be decreased. The second part of the equation is the oxygen content equation we just went over. Simply multiplying the amount of blood pumped out of the heart by the amount of oxygen in the blood, both attached to the hemoglobin molecule and dissolved in the plasma, will give one the amount of oxygen delivered to the body. The next part of the oxygen delivery will look at a practical application of oxygen delivery. Thank you.